Hey everyone! What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Fusion Deck User in a different Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 471, Support from the Back. Wait, you actually built a remote communicator into the Duel Runner? How did you even manage that? Hikaru blinked as a familiar voice came through the D-Wheel speakers. He was surprised, but not exactly shocked. Ha! And here I thought I'd make you jump if I suddenly spoke up, came the smug reply. I had Makuba Kaiba help me out. Top-tier tech, you know, so don't break it. Hikaru glanced toward Tiara, deadpan. If it did break, she could probably fix it anyway. So? How's life over there treating you? Don't even start, Chaz. Thanks to your little modification, I nearly lost my first riding duel because the runner was too slow. What, you jealous I won the championship, so you sabotaged me? Ha! If you actually knew how to ride, I wouldn't have had to limit it. Look at yourself for once, champion. Chaz practically shouted that last word, and Hikaru could only roll his eyes. After a bit of banter, Hikaru returned to his underground base. He boiled a pot of water, poured himself a cup, and, while sipping it, reattached his duel disc to his arm. The holographic projector came to life as he reviewed the day's duel data, chatting idly with Chaz. To Hikaru, it might only be a matter of months before he returned to Duel Academy, but from Chaz's point of view, Hikaru had vanished into another dimension alone, a completely foreign world, without allies or backup. He couldn't help but worry. So whenever work didn't keep him too busy, Chaz always tried to call, offering advice or just keeping Hikaru company. And honestly, Hikaru had to admit that Detective Princeton really did have a knack for analysis. He'd fit right into the synchro dimension. It was a shame he had his own career and goals. If Chaz were here, things would be a lot easier. Hikaru paused, glancing down at the crimson mark glowing faintly on his left hand, then began explaining to Chaz why he'd come to this world, and what he was truly searching for. Sometime later. I see, Chaz said thoughtfully. So that's why you disappeared. You always said you wanted to check out the synchro dimension, but you never told anyone why or how. Turns out that card, Dragon Necro Nethersal Dragon, is a special one from that dimension, huh? That explained a lot. Makes sense now, Chaz continued. After you came back, you started running zombie-type monsters. Before that, I never saw you use anything even close to that theme. As expected of the self-proclaimed detective, he'd already pieced the situation together from a few details. Ha! Everyone else said you were probably still holed up in the lab again. But I told them, nah, Hikaru might lock himself in there for days, but he'd never skip something important. Even Professor Growler got dragged into it. Some TV station wanted to interview you, he agreed, but when he texted, you never replied. Text? Hikaru frowned, pulling out his phone. Sure enough, there was a message, timestamped exactly when the Crimson Dragon had pulled him into this dimension. And then? I covered for you, obviously. Chaz snorted. After you won the championship, half the academy wanted a piece of you, but Growler turned them all away. One of his old colleagues even showed up looking for you. Poof, gone again. He paused for dramatic effect. And get this, since you won, a bunch of underclass girls have been hammering on the Fusion Club door non-stop. Poor Serena can't even get through her alchemy experiments without someone knocking every 10 minutes. Haha. Yeah, I'll, make sure to apologize to Professor Growler and Serena later, Hikaru replied awkwardly. Chaz muttered, thinking aloud. About your situation over there, I've done a bit of analysis. Here we go. Hikaru sighed. Listen. I've been to that world too, remember? I looked into how the upper and lower sectors work. So I can tell you right now, the tension between them isn't really because of the gods. Or at least, not just because of them. It's the result of years of social and economic imbalance. From that perspective, whatever that Shinji guy's dark mark told him, well, it's definitely not the whole picture. Maybe even biased. You needed to analyze that? Yeah, thanks, detective. Go to bed already, Hikaru said, waving him off. Did Chaz really think he was an idiot? Wait, hold it. Don't hang up yet, the important part's coming. Then get to it. If what that guy said is true, then one thing's certain. He, or whoever's backing him, maybe even that so-called god, believes that if he wins, he can make his ideal world real. That much, Hikaru had to agree with. If the earthbound gods from the original timeline were as powerful here as before, and if he truly gathered all the signers and dark signers' marks to turn his god into the one true deity, then reshaping the world to his liking wouldn't be hard. Resurrecting the dead of the lower sector? Easy. Feeding on the souls of the rest of humanity? Also easy. Earthbound gods never cared about that sort of thing. And Shinji himself clearly didn't care either. He'd never even questioned why the city had become so divided, he only wanted his dream fulfilled. But finding your opponents in a city that huge must be a nightmare, right? Hikaru said. Exactly. And from what you told me, every dark signer uses writing duels to draw those earthbound patterns. That means each of them has a limited territory. So if they don't overlap, how are they even supposed to fight each other? That's why I think it's not about elimination at all, it's about conversion. In other words, they use writing duels to rewrite the other's mark into their own pattern. That's why encounters between dark signers and dragon signers aren't random, they're inevitable. You showing up in that dimension and meeting two dark signers within days? That's not luck, Hikaru. That's destiny. Hikaru raised an eyebrow, realizing what he meant. So the dark signers and dragon signers are drawn to each other? That would explain everything. He'd thought of himself as just a bystander, someone who would finish his own mission and leave. But maybe that wasn't possible. Unlike in the original world, where dark signers fought out of hatred, this dimension seemed different. No hatred. Just resonance, mark-seeking worthy duelists. Accepting Dragon Necro's power and easing Mudragon's vengeance, it really wasn't that simple after all. Exactly. Chaz exclaimed. Man, Hikaru, you pick things up fast. You've got that D-wheel now, right? Tomorrow, try cruising around. If my theory's right, you'll run into that Shinji guy soon enough. Heh, you might be right. Thanks, Chaz. Don't mention it, man. We, me, the professor, everyone, we're rooting for you. If things ever get too rough out there, don't forget you've still got us. Hikaru couldn't help but smile. Chapter 472, The Original King and the Reporter. Night had fallen, yet this decayed, ancient, and unchanging world did not rest beneath the darkness. If anything, it spun even faster. In front of Neo Domino City's largest hospital, the press had swarmed the entrance so tightly that not even air could pass through. Flashes from countless cameras strobed across the doors in relentless succession, and the glare from the floodlights turned night into day. At the center of the crowd stood a broad-shouldered, refined-looking man in a pristine suit, his hands clasped calmly behind his back, his expression composed. Director Rex Goodwin. The number of reporters was so overwhelming that sector security officers had to form a human barricade just to keep microphones from being shoved into his face. Director Goodwin. What's your response to Sector Security's latest failure in today's writing duel pursuit? Reports claimed the opponent was an interdimensional duelist. Are otherworldly invaders truly infiltrating our city? Director Goodwin. It's been 2 weeks since KCG champion Jack Atlas lost to UCI Fudo in the Fortune Cup finals, yet Jack still hasn't appeared in public. Rumors say you secretly eliminated him, care to explain? Director Goodwin. Reliable sources allege you plotted to assassinate senior nobles of the Senate, forcing months of political infighting. How far has that conflict gone? Goodwin showed not a trace of concern. He answered each question with the same poised smile, his voice measured and unhurried, utterly at ease amid the chaos. Then, from deep within the sea of reporters, a smaller figure pushed forward, a young woman with long, straight black hair and oversized round glasses, gripping a cheap microphone with both hands. Carly Carmine. Goodwin recognized her immediately. A lower-tier journalist from an obscure tabloid, born in the upper district but far from its elite. An ambitious nobody, one among thousands. "Director Goodwin, may I ask something?" she shouted above the noise. During the Fortune Cup finals, both UCI Futo and Jack Atlas had a red glow appear on their arms. What was that? For the first time, Goodwin's eyes narrowed. His pupils contracted, and the hands behind his back subtly shifted. So, someone had noticed. Out of all these people, she alone had perceived the glow of the Crimson Dragon's marks. He studied her briefly. Ordinary, utterly ordinary. And yet, to notice that, did she possess a spark of potential? What's the big deal? Probably just dual energy resonance. You know, those spirits otherworlders are always babbling about. Yeah, stop wasting his time. Let the rest of us talk. Even among the upper classes there was hierarchy. To them, a common reporter like Carly taking up Goodwin's time was unforgivable. "As for your question," Goodwin replied at last, offering the faintest nod, "perhaps one day you'll learn the answer yourself. Until then, there's no need for me to explain." That was all the courtesy he gave her. The other accusations, murder, conspiracy, treason, he ignored completely. Such matters were beneath discussion. Yes, he had eliminated certain meddlesome pests, but to the citizens of Neodomino, those people did not even exist. After all, the public believed the city was governed solely by sector security. Only those who reached the top learned the truth, that behind the facade lay a hidden Senate pulling the strings. Goodwin himself hadn't known until he became director. And when he did, he struck. During the last Friendship Cup between the Fusion and Synchro dimensions, he quietly wiped out the entire Senate. His cleanup had been immaculate, yet the surviving aristocrats still pieced together fragments of the truth, that he was the one behind the purge. It didn't matter. Their reactions were exactly as he'd foreseen. Some sought his death. Others tried to recruit him. A few fools even hoped to replace their fallen peers by joining him. Pathetic. Even with the Senate gone, the nobility still owned nearly 99% of the city's wealth. Centuries of peace and indulgence had made them soft. They had no idea the world was on the brink of transformation. Goodwin exhaled softly, almost amused. How shallow, he thought. They can't even sense the change is coming. He had no interest in their petty power games. His attention was fixed solely on his plan, a destiny moving forward, one deliberate step at a time. "Director Goodwin," another reporter shouted. "About these interdimensional duelists, what do you know about them? You've been in the hospital, so you might not have heard." How did Goodwin see it? Of course, he knew exactly what had happened. Not only did he know, he had seen it with his own eyes. The spectral D-wheel once belonging to his brother, Roman, galloping away to follow its new master. Yes, he had seen it more clearly than anyone else. Goodwin knew what the lower district rebels were plotting. He even knew the nobles, those bloated remnants of the old Senate, had secretly joined forces with powers from another dimension, gathering strength to strike at him. They thought he was unaware. Sooner or later, they'll all die, he mused. Some people just can't wait their turn. As the reporters continued to shout, Goodwin's sharp eyes caught something none of them noticed. Carly Carmine had slipped past the guards. Disguised. Interesting. That ability to suppress her presence, that skill for disguise, perhaps she really was gifted after all. Goodwin's smile returned as he resumed answering questions, pretending nothing was amiss. If the mark of the dragon and the mark of the shadows were destined to meet, then let curiosity guide her, let her see for herself. Carly moved deeper into the hospital. Using her quick thinking and remarkable talent for costume changes, she easily blended in as a nurse and slipped into the restricted ward. She'd come hoping to interview Jack Atlas, and she found him almost immediately. The former king was staggering down the hallway, one arm braced against the wall. Half of his body still refused to respond. So it's true, Carly thought. That terrifying crimson light during the Fortune Cup final, it hadn't been an illusion. The explosion from that glow had been real. Otherwise, how could a man as tough as Jack Atlas still be half-crippled weeks later? Before she could speak, Jack's legs gave way. Startled, Carly lunged forward to catch him. For a girl who'd never so much as brushed against a man before, suddenly supporting someone as tall and broad-shouldered as Jack was almost impossible. She was about to scold him, tell him he should still be resting, when the corridor temperature plunged. The air turned white with frost. Ice crystals crept along the walls, and the hospital's fluorescent lights flickered as if the entire building had fallen into a blizzard. A man in a security guard's uniform staggered toward them, his eyes empty, his breath freezing in the air. On his left arm glowed a black sigil, twisted and pulsing like a dark mirror of Jack's own crimson dragon mark. Carly froze. Needles of ice erupted around them, shooting through the air like spears. If Jack hadn't reacted instantly, both of them might have been skewered where they stood. What is this? A psychic duelist, she gasped, her voice trembling. Before panic could set in, Jack grabbed her arm and pulled her close. Their eyes met for a single heartbeat. Take my duel disc, Jack barked. Draw for me, play the cards, I'll give the orders. Even wounded, he radiated that same unshakable king's aura. Carly's heart pounded, but she obeyed without hesitation. Together, the two of them faced the dark figure, Jack commanding, Carly drawing and placing the cards. And somehow, every time she drew, her hand seemed guided by fate itself. Each card was exactly what Jack needed. When danger closed in, she played with uncanny instinct. As though something inside her was awakening. Not bad, Jack said curtly when the duel finally ended, for a reporter. He turned away, still pale, still unsteady on his feet. You're still hurt, she protested. You need to rest. This city doesn't need a crippled king. Jack shot back, forcing himself down the hall. Damn it, those dark signers, they'll go after UCI next. Where the hell are you, UCI? Carly stood frozen in place. And in that moment, she finally understood. Jack's injuries hadn't lasted all this time because doctors had failed to heal him, they lingered because he refused to rest. Ever since the Fortune Cup, he had forced his body through duel after duel against one dark signer puppet after another, each battle leaving him more battered, more broken. When he finally stumbled out of the hospital and collapsed on the pavement, Carly had no choice. Cursing under her breath, she hauled his dead weight into her car and somehow drove him home. Honestly, I've never brought a man home before, especially not one like you, she fumed, cheeks red with exertion. That night, Jack finally slept, a deep, dream-laden sleep he hadn't known in weeks. In the dream, he was adrift in a sea of stars. Two colossal crimson dragons collided across the void, each roar shattering constellations, each tail lash shaking the heavens themselves. The sight was so overwhelming, he couldn't help but cry out. Ah, and then he woke, gasping, in an unfamiliar room. Through the window, he saw the spire of a tower rising against the dawn. His body, finally given rest, felt marginally restored. He swung his legs off the bed and crossed into the living room, where Carly lay fast asleep over her desk, her glasses askew. He didn't wake her. Instead, he found a coat, hat, and dark glasses, anything to hide his face, and slipped out into the morning streets. Now he wandered, lost in thought. His duel with UCI had once opened his eyes to his own limits, and afterward he'd returned the Stardust Dragon to UCI, admitting his mistakes. But after losing again, to UCI himself at the Fortune Cup, a question gnawed at him. Does a king like me even deserve to exist anymore? He had spent his whole life climbing upward, yet at the summit he'd found only emptiness. What was a king, really? A puppet in a crown. The true power of the city still rested in the hands of the nobles, even Rex Goodwin couldn't change that. Honestly, a drowsy voice said behind him, you just got one night's rest and you're already sneaking out? Jack turned. It was the nurse from the hospital, though now, clearly, not a nurse at all. Carly rubbed her eyes, barely awake. Jack said nothing. He simply turned away. Hey, Jack, she called, but he didn't answer. With a sigh, Carly followed, keeping her distance. They passed a storefront where a giant screen replayed footage of Jack's losses. The once glorious king of duelists was reduced to a montage of defeat. Jack's fists clenched. He gave a short, bitter laugh and walked on. Across the city, UCI's name now blazed as the symbol of hope. Jack knew it was time to hunt down the Dark Signers and to find UCI. Since that final duel, UCI had vanished completely, leaving no trace but the faint pulse of the Crimson Dragon's mark. Carly trailed behind him silently, watching his face shift between anger, pride, and confusion. The upper city was buzzing, people whispering about UCI's victory, nobles scoffing that Jack Atlas was never worthy, children's playgrounds stripping down his statues and banners. The once golden image of the king was being erased piece by piece. Jack finally sank onto a park bench, staring blankly at the setting sun. Everywhere he walked, he heard the same words. UCI. 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 He'd thought that by casting aside everything, fame, luxury, control, and dueling UCI for the sake of the Red Dragon Archfiend, he might reach new heights. But in the end, it was UCI who had ascended. And he, the king, had fallen. Sigh. His eyes were vacant. Just then, a kid suddenly noticed him. Even with the disguise, that blonde hair and that exaggerated build and height were impossible to hide. The child recognized Jack at once, ran over, and waved, "King." Jack came to himself and looked at the kid. "King," the kid cheered, excited just because Jack looked his way. From behind the child, Carly lightly patted his shoulder. When he turned, she said, "Jack's doing a secret mission right now. Don't tell anyone, okay? It's just between us." The child immediately clamped both hands over his mouth and nodded, trying to whisper through his excitement, "I'm a huge fan of Jack. Everyone says he's a fraud, but I don't believe it. I'll always support you." Even though Jack had just heard the kid's parent, a noble, bad-mouthing him, the child showed no disgust at all, only pure excitement. This little guy truly saw Jack as an idol, a hero who could bridge the gap between the satellite and the city. Jack knew there were many kids like that in the satellite too, the same ones who followed those two brats around UCI and also took him as an idol. Even though the reason he became king had a lot to do with stealing Stardust Dragon from UCI. But children are the purest, the most sincere. Jack looked at him, ruffled his hair, then left without changing expression. "Jack, make sure you become king again," the kid called after him. Carly kept tailing Jack until he climbed a tall tower and stared out over the sea. Carly looked out too. The sunset over the horizon was especially beautiful. Normally, you'd think Jack came to sightsee and clear his head. "But, you can't see the satellite from here," she said suddenly. Jack's pupils tightened. He hadn't expected this woman to read his thoughts. "You're a reporter here just to interview me, right? Report whatever you want about me." "I don't write hit pieces that smear duelists," Carly said. Though she came from an upper city family, Carly had always believed the world shouldn't be like this. That's why she chose a small tabloid over chasing status. Jack fell silent. 2 years ago, I left the satellite for the city, abandoning my hometown and my friends. I lost everything then, and in exchange, I got a fake identity and kept playing the clown on the road to a so-called king, the road of a foolish duelist who'd even forgotten who he was. If you see it that clearly, then start over." The seemingly ditzy reporter stepped up beside Jack, watching the sunset with him. "After your duel with UCI, the old Jack died. So become the true king now. What's the problem?" Staring at the horizon, memories of friends flashed through Jack's eyes, UCI's figure, the Dark Signers and the Signers, and that lesson duel he'd once witnessed. Yes. He should have decided to be reborn back then, only now had he truly come to terms with it. He opened his eyes, tossed his hat to the wind, shed his disguise, and revealed the king's coat. "You're right. I'm done hesitating, I'll walk my own path. Now it was his turn to repay UCI. He turned and strode away. Wait up, Jack. Carly, who'd kept up the smart act for all of a minute, dropped the facade and hurried after him. Don't follow me. What I'm doing is very dangerous. MMPH. So you're underestimating me, huh? I know, you're looking for marks too, right? I've been investigating them for a while. I found an organization that seems tied to those marks. It's called the Arcadia Movement. Arcadia Movement. At that moment, Hikaru frowned as he looked into the distance. A group of sharply dressed upper city types were spouting all kinds of slick knowledge, inviting satellite children to try out, promising that if they qualified, they'd get free food, maybe even direct entry to the city. It sounded exactly like a predatory talent drive. But in the satellite, the slightest chance to reach the city drew crowds like moths to a flame, especially if all it took was a simple test of one's psychic powers. If you really had psychic ability, getting into the city wasn't a problem. This Arcadia Movement was the city's biggest and most famous psychic training institute. Right now, they were promoting in a satellite sector non-stop, talking up the strength and future of psychic duelists. With the appearance of interdimensional visitors, psychics, who could replicate spirits' feats with pure psychic force, had become a hot trend with lots of backers. That meant these institutes came with perks. Like today, escorting satellite residents into the city without security interference. But in Hikaru's eyes, they didn't look at those children like students or juniors. Their gaze had a hard-to-describe mania, like shoppers picking out pork or chicken at a market. It made Hikaru deeply uncomfortable. He glanced at the mark on his left hand. He'd made plans today and was ready to run into a dark signer, but after a full day of roaming he hadn't met a single one. He'd just been about to tell Chaz that his "they'll be drawn to you" theory was bunk when, on the way back to base, he ran into these Arcadia psychics. More importantly, his mark was faintly glowing. Chapter 473, Arcadia Movement. Arcadia Movement. A beautiful name for what claimed to be a psychic training institute. Its founder was a psychic duelist named Sayer, a man who could use telekinesis to make duel monsters physically manifest, inflicting real injuries through duels. Hikaru watched as members of the Arcadia Movement handed out money to satellite parents, guardians, and even gang leaders, then led groups of children away. He quietly followed behind, wanting to see what this institution was really doing. Could it be Akiza Izinski? Although this world differed from the one he knew, the timeline seemed roughly the same. That meant at this point in time, Akiza was probably still part of the Arcadia Movement. As a signer, she might even be here now. It was just a guess, but Hikaru figured there was no harm in checking. So he silently followed them inside the Arcadia building. At the same time, elsewhere, another pair, a man and a woman, had also infiltrated the Arcadia Movement. Even though Jack had the legendary record of knocking out 10 men with his fists, this time his opponents were psychics. Even Jack wasn't arrogant enough to underestimate them. He stayed cautious beside Carly, observing this strange organization. He'd never heard of a psychic training institute before. All he knew was that UCI had once dueled some kind of witch who used psychic powers, but Jack hadn't paid attention to the details. Now that he was standing inside such a place, his curiosity was piqued. Since they were sneaking in, they avoided the front entrance and the public halls, choosing a back route instead. As they went deeper, they began to hear a man's voice. Jack climbed up to a ventilation grate and looked down through it. A sharply dressed man with slick back hair stood before a crowd of trainees, speaking passionately. My beloved members. The world is about to undergo an unprecedented transformation. The end of the world is coming. Another nutcase preaching the apocalypse? Carly muttered under her breath. Cults and scam organizations always seem to love talking about the end of the world. Carly hadn't investigated this one deeply, but she'd read plenty of similar cases, all just conmen trying to milk believers for money. Jack, however, stayed unusually silent. As a signer, he knew all too well that what Sayer was saying wasn't exactly wrong. The end of the world really was approaching. No matter who won, the signers or the dark signers, the victor's god would recreate the world in their own image. The current world would be destroyed. That destruction was the so-called end of the world. But then Jack frowned, staring at Sayer's arm. He had no dark sign or dragon mark, so how did he even know about these things? He would find out soon enough. To survive the apocalypse, to build a new order after the world ends, for all of humanity who have suffered so long. For every person who's gone hungry or cold, we of the Arcadia movement have spent countless lives and finally created it. Our ultimate weapon, the telekinetic executioner. Our pride and our salvation. Once we win the coming war, we will create a pure, spiritual world that will replace the gods of today, a new god born from humanity itself. In that world, there will be no more hunger, no more pain, a perfect world of spirit and thought. This guy's insane, Carly whispered. Jack felt a bit disappointed. He hadn't seen any dark signers, only a lunatic. That made the whole trip feel pointless. But just as the two of them were about to leave, the massive metal door behind Sayer slowly opened. A gigantic, silver-white mechanical demon with huge green wings rose into view before the Arcadia members. The creature's body was covered in pipes that spread throughout the facility. As the monster appeared, countless cries, screams, and sobs echoed through the building. What the? Carly nearly jumped to her feet, but Jack grabbed her hand and held her back. Even without seeing where those pipes connected, just hearing those terrified, childlike screams made Carly's mind flash with every glowing headline she'd ever written. Arcadia Movement sponsors Orphans from the Satellite, wins Most Charitable Research Organization of the Year. Arcadia partners with Security Bureau to study psychic power and prepare for dimensional threats. Another 30 children adopted. Who is the visionary leader behind Arcadia? Each headline replayed in her mind like a cruel joke. Now, the truth was painfully clear. The people of the Arcadia movement weren't taking children from the satellite to train them as psychic duelists. They were using them as batteries, draining their psychic energy to fuel this twisted god for their own ambitions. Jack's face darkened. He silently drew his duel disc, ready to jump down and settle it right then and there. But before he could move, boom! The front gate exploded open. In the smoke, a purple-clad figure stepped forward. Hikaru Amagi. Jack froze mid-motion. An outsider, one of the psychics shouted, panic spreading among them. Do not panic. Sayer calmly clapped his hands, soothing his students before stepping forward to face Hikaru. So, you must be the duelist from another dimension, Hikaru Amagi. Tell me, are you here to witness our god? God? Hikaru's eyes glimmered faintly with purple light. You call this thing a god? A wretched phantom built from the blood and suffering of children? How narrow-minded, outsider. Sayer chuckled softly and shook his head. A god is merely a being of immense power. If the one god can call other failed gods demons or monsters, then why can we not call a demon our god as well? As he spoke, a cruel smile spread across his face. A strange mark appeared on his forehead, different from both the Crimson Dragon's mark and the Dark Sign, yet somehow connected to both. Hikaru narrowed his eyes slightly. Tiara stood beside Hikaru, her tone serious even though her expression looked a bit strange. Hikaru, even if that man is talking nonsense, that card really is a god level 1. At least on par with the sacred beasts. Can something like that really create a god? Hikaru asked quietly. Impossible. If that were true, with your alchemy skills you could have mass-produced monsters of that level already. Tiara shook her head immediately. Capturing dozens or even hundreds of children just to power one card, if that were all it took to create a virtual god capable of forming a new world, Hikaru could have done it himself long ago, and in bulk. I knew it, Hikaru narrowed his eyes. He could feel an enormous power coming from Sayer, and within that power, something familiar. Darkness. The end of the world. The extinction of humanity. That was the ultimate conclusion of the 5D's world's future timeline. The embodiment of that doomed future, darkness, was the result. Now it all made sense. Everything that had happened since Hikaru arrived in this world was finally coming together. But for now, there was one immediate priority: getting rid of the thing that disgusted him the most right in front of him. Sayer raised his golden dual disc, the device's core spinning and glowing with multicolored light. A burst of invisible power shot toward Hikaru. Hikaru didn't even flinch. The invisible blast tore past him, slamming into the massive iron gate behind. In just seconds, the gate bent inward, crumpled in half, and ended up full of holes. To Hikaru, it was nothing more than a passing breeze that barely lifted a few strands of his hair. As expected of a duelist from another dimension, Sayer said with calm confidence after seeing his attack have no effect. He remained as composed as ever, wearing the same polished smile. Well then. Sayer's gaze moved to Hikaru's left hand. A genuine Signer's mark. Once I destroy you and cut off that left hand, our god of the virtual world will become even more complete. Duel. Sayer, LP 4000. Hikaru Amagi, LP 4000. Chapter 474, It's Almost Time. Jack and Carly watched the duel unfolding below. To them, both duelists were complete strangers. But Jack knew one extra detail. The dark sign. He could see the glowing mark on Hikaru Amagi's left hand. And yet, in Jack's heart, it was Sayer, the man standing opposite Hikaru, who truly deserved to be crushed. Draw. Sayer drew a card from his deck, the massive, spectral demon looming behind him, breathing heavily. Though it was just a psychic construct, surrounded by the maze of pipes and the echoing cries of pain, the demon looked disturbingly real. Master Sayer, you can do it. Show us your power. A few of the psychics cheered loudly for him. Sayer smiled serenely, replying in his usual calm tone, "Don't worry, everyone. This is for humanity's future." Hikaru's voice cut through coldly. Slaughtering children, the real future, and you still dare to talk about saving humanity? It's only a necessary sacrifice. Sayer spread his arms like a false messiah, smiling as he continued. You of all people should understand, Dark Signer. Every few millennia, gods wage war. Their chosen champions destroy the world again and again until the cycle resets. He raised both hands toward the ceiling. No matter who wins, those who survive in the end are always different. If one of those victors happens to be insane, this world could fall into eternal damnation. But now we humans have a new possibility. A future that belongs to us, not to gods. His voice grew louder, more fanatical. The spiritual world. If we create our own god, a god born of humanity, then no matter who wins this divine war, we will live forever in that world of spirit. In that world, there will be no poverty, no hunger, limitless resources for everyone. Isn't that true salvation? Thunderous applause filled the hall. The Arcadia members clapped, cheered, and shouted Sayer's name. Even Carly almost joined in by reflex before Jack grabbed her wrist, pulling her back to her senses. For a moment, she thought, if it really worked, maybe that wouldn't be so bad. In that world, maybe the gap between the tops and the satellite would finally disappear. Hikaru slowly raised his hand in front of him. Sounds nice. But when that time comes, the difference between people won't be wealth, it'll be psychic power. Ordinary people will become the lowest caste, and the psychics will be your new nobles. Carly's eyes widened. He was right. She had almost been fooled. The Arcadia members began shouting insults. You fool! You don't understand greatness. How dare you slander Lord Sayer? Sayer waved his hand calmly, silencing them. It's fine. He's an outsider, a dark signer from another world. It's only natural he can't comprehend our noble ideals. He smiled, lifted a card from his hand, and declared. My turn. I normal summon Psychic Beast. He placed the card on his dual disc, and with a cry, a green-haired creature with a serpent's tail materialized, letting out a fierce roar. Psychic Beast, Level 2, Earth Attribute, Beast Type, ATK 700. When Psy Beast is normal summoned, I can banish one Psychic-type monster from my deck. Then, this card's level becomes the same as that monster's. Sayer lifted his left hand, and cards from his deck floated into the air under a wave of psychic energy. I banished the level 3 monster Mind Protector from my deck, and make Psybeast's level become 3. A green-haired psychic wearing dark glasses shimmered and vanished from within Sayer's aura. At the same moment, the air filled with the sound of tortured screaming. Psybeast, level 2 level 3. Next, when I control a level 3 monster, I can special summon this card from my hand. Come forth, Tuner Monster Psychic Wielder. A robot with glowing lenses and a spinning wheel-shaped body rolled onto the field, circling Sayer like a guard dog. Psychic Wielder, level 3, Earth, Psychic type, ATK 600. I tune level 3 Psychic Wielder with level 3 Psybeast. The flames of hatred burning within my heart turn into a dark torrent that surges through this world. Synchro Summon. Appear. Hyper Psychic Riser. The giant wheel controlled by Psychic Wielder expanded, and another dark wheel materialized beside it. The two wheels spun in unison, fusing together in a burst of psychic light. From above descended a muscular, cybernetic humanoid surrounded by rings of balanced energy. Hyper Psychic Riser, level 6, Earth, Psychic type, ATK 2000. 2000 attack points? Jack frowned. With only 2000, that doesn't sound very impressive. Wow, 2000 attack points? That's so strong. Carly murmured under her breath. Jack side-eyed her. He had seen her deck before, filled with zero-attack normal monsters and gimmicky cards, so for her, 2000 probably did sound huge. But for Sayer to go through all that just to synchro summon one monster, there had to be a catch. Or maybe that man was confident enough that 2000 attack points was more than enough. I set 3 cards face down and end my turn. Sayer placed 3 cards neatly on his field, then extended a hand, motioning to Hikaru. Your move. Draw. Hikaru calmly started his turn. Only 2000 attack points, seems easy enough to deal with, right, Hikaru? Tiara mused beside him. Though, he did set 3 cards. Probably traps or defensive setups. If they're just support or bluff cards, you might be able to win this in one turn. Not that simple. Hikaru studied the field. While Hyper Psychic Riser is on the field, monsters with lower ATK can't declare attacks, and monsters with higher ATK can't activate their effects. Sayer's face remained calm and smiling, completely unbothered that his monster's effect had been seen through. That actually sounds pretty strong, doesn't it? Carly said in surprise. A monster with 2000 attack points that could lock down both attacks and effects, plus 3 fakedowns, seemed practically unbeatable. With that many defenses, it looks like he's untouchable. Jack scoffed. Not taking risks is just the mindset of the weak. If you're going to duel, then you fight for victory, nothing else. Hikaru's expression stayed cool. It looks powerful at first glance, but that ability is spread too thin. It only restricts the field, and its effect stops higher ATK monsters only. I normal summon Predaplant Chlamydosundu. He raised his hand, and the card flew onto the duel disc, projecting a hologram of a writhing green plant with snapping tendrils. Predaplant Chlamydosundu, level 2, Dark, Plant type, ATK 600. During my main phase, I can activate its effect. For a fusion monster that lists a dark monster as material, I can send the fusion materials from my hand, field, and even my opponent's monsters that have Predaplant counters to the graveyard, and fusion summon one fusion monster. Oh? So you can perform fusion summons without polymerization? That's quite an efficient fusion method, Sayer commented, his tone still elegant and calm. You can even use cards from your hand. No wonder you dared to challenge a synchro user. He slowly lifted both hands, shaking his head as if pitying Hikaru. But synchro summoning is the power of the future. Stronger than fusion ever was. Allow me to show you why our world abandoned your outdated method. Suddenly his eyes widened, his calm face twisting into a predatory grin as he slammed a card down. I activate a monster effect from my hand. What? From his hand? But it's Hikaru's turn. Tiara exclaimed. Hikaru's brow furrowed. That reaction, he knew it. When a monster effect is activated on the field, or the effect of a face-up spell or trap is activated, I can discard this card from my hand to the graveyard to negate and destroy that card. Appear Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. A pale-haired girl in a tattered kimono descended from the psychic ether, her red eyes glowing faintly. She flung a paper charm at the Predaplant, and the creature burst into blue flames before it could complete its fusion. Because its material was destroyed, the effect failed entirely. Ghost Ogre, huh? Hikaru muttered with a strange expression, somewhere between exasperation and nostalgia. Chapter 475, Retribution of Reincarnation. Predaplant Chlamydosunda's effect requires it to use itself as fusion material. Since it was destroyed, I can't fusion summon with it. Although Hikaru had fallen for a hand trap, he didn't panic. Calmly, he raised another card. I activate the continuous spell Brilliant Fusion. I can activate it when my opponent controls a monster. I send fusion materials listed on a non-Archetype Gemknight fusion monster from my deck to the graveyard to fusion summon that monster. Directly fusion summoning from the deck? That's quite a strong effect, Sayer said with a composed, gentlemanly smile. But surely a card that strong has a price, doesn't it? As the activation cost, after this effect resolves, until the end of the turn, I cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except Gemknights. Sayer smiled confidently. I see now. That's why you normal summoned that Chlamydosundu earlier. If you activate this card first, you can't fusion summon the Predaplant afterwards. I send Gemknight Tourmaline and Gemknight Crystal from my deck to the graveyard to fusion summon. Hikaru declared happily, calling out his classic monster. Gemknight Prismora. The captain of White Crystal stood proudly upon the land of Synchro Dimension. Gemknight Prismora, level 7, Earth, Thundertype, ATK 2450. Prismora, attack Hyper Psychic Riser. The White Crystal captain raised his shield and hurled it like a boomerang. It ricocheted off, shattering the two spinning wheels, and the riser lost balance, crashing down and bursting into fragments. Sayer, LP, 4035.50. No trap cards at all? Carly asked in confusion, glancing at Jack. Jack shook his head, just as puzzled. Activate Hyper Psychic Riser's monster effect. When this card destroyed by an opponent and sent to the graveyard, I can target one tuner and one non-tuner monster in my graveyard that share its attribute and type, add them to my hand. I return Psybeast and Psychic Wielder to my hand. He casually picked up the cards from his graveyard. I see now, Jack murmured. He set up a roadblock monster on his first turn, and even if it gets destroyed, he recovers his Synchro materials for a follow-up Synchro next turn. It was a simple but effective strategy. Combined with his Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, it could sustain a long duel. But, what about those 3 set cards? Jack muttered. Hikaru glanced at the left side of his field, smiled slightly, and placed 3 cards face down. Then I set 3 cards and end my turn. Huh, that's it? Sayer chuckled. You still have much to learn. Oh? I just did the same thing you did. It's fine, young one. You simply don't understand us yet, Sayer said grandly, his expression calm as he raised his voice for all to hear. You, a duelist who can traverse dimensions and compete in the Friendship Cup, must have considerable talent. You just don't yet grasp our higher purpose. So why not listen during this duel, and join us, walking toward the light of the future together? Impeccably dressed, eloquent, and radiating a false sense of grandeur, Sayer's speech might have fooled a naive Rosewitch. But Hikaru clearly wasn't buying it. He simply crossed his arms and stared silently, pretending he hadn't heard a thing. Ha! Sayer's smile finally began to fade. He had said so many good things, yet Hikaru remained completely expressionless. It was making Sayer lose patience with his own act. Oof. My turn, draw. He drew, glanced at the card, and his mouth twitched downward. Though he boasted of his psychic genius, the truth was far different. He wasn't really a prodigy. He'd tricked a few genuine ones before, but most had either died or escaped before he could use them. I activate the trap card psychic trigger. He raised his left hand and closed his eyes in concentration. Nearby, the huge artificial demon behind him began to growl. Black smoke poured from his body, mingling with flickers of eerie green lightning. He laughed coldly as his eyes glowed. The cries of the children bound to the machine abruptly fell silent. Clearly, the immense psychic backlash had forced many of them into unconsciousness. Seeing this, Jack's pupils narrowed. Silently, he began crawling toward another passage. Jack? Carly had no idea what Jack was planning or why he suddenly left without even watching the duel. But when she saw him slipping away, she didn't hesitate, she followed. Sayer raised his hand. I activate this effect because my life points are lower than my opponent's. I banish 2 psychic monsters from my graveyard to draw 2 cards. He turned over his graveyard, banishing Hyper Psychic Riser and Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, then drew 2 new cards. When he looked at them, his expression brightened immediately. As expected, this power is real. With this power, I can truly become a god, the one and only god above all. He laughed. And I'm not done yet. I activate my trap card, Bright Future. He held up the card proudly. Behold, my followers. This is the symbol of our research. A brilliant white glow burst from Sayer's body. In an instant, the entire hall of the organization was flooded with dazzling light. All around, each person suddenly saw another self appear beside them, a glowing outline, a simplified, spiritual projection of their own being. What is this? Incredible! It's real. The end of the world is real. The virtual world is real. Master Sayer. Master Sayer. As the light rose, the psychic energy of these followers became linked with the artificial god looming behind him. In their eyes, they were already inside a spiritual world, free to reshape their surroundings at will. Some fell to the ground laughing, others spun or screamed in ecstasy. Cult. That word suddenly surfaced in Hikaru Amaji's mind. This wasn't a spiritual world. It was something else, something far more familiar to him. Darkness's nightmare world. In the final arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, Darkness brainwashed nearly the entire human race. Every person was trapped in their own dream, forced to relive the most despair-filled moments of their lives over and over again, endlessly. And now, this scene looked chillingly similar. Ever since the events surrounding Tyrant Neptune, Hikaru knew Darkness was never idle. It had spent every waking moment preparing for the end of humanity, even absorbing Tragedia in the process. But he hadn't realized that it had already reached into this dimension. Creating an artificial god, infecting every human mind, and driving them to self-destruction. Sayer raised his card again. Bright Future's effect. I target 2 of my banished psychic monsters, return them to the graveyard, and draw 1 card. I return Mental Seeker and Hyper Psychic Riser to the graveyard, then draw 1 card. He drew, his excitement overflowing. Do you see it? This is our bright future. I see no bright future, Hikaru replied coldly. All I see is wasted effort. You isolate some people, then send others straight to the grave. Oof. Still stubborn, are you? Fine, I activate the continuous spell Teleport. Once per turn, if only your field has a monster, I pay 800 life points to special summon 1 psychic monster from my hand. I special summon Master Gig. Sayer, LP, 3550-2750. A large, round monster slowly descended, barely humanoid, its bulbous body gleaming with psychic energy. Master Gig, Level 8, Earth, Psychic, ATK 2600. Now, Master Gig's effect. I pay 1000 life points to destroy monsters on my opponent's field up to the number of face-up psychic monsters I control. This effect can only be used once per turn, but that's enough. Pay 1000 life points and destroy your Gem Knight Prismora. Master Gig spun like a massive iron flail, slamming into Prismora. The white crystal captain shattered into fragments and vanished. Sayer, LP, 2750-1750. Next, I normal summon Psybeast, Level 2. I activate its effect. I banish Mental Seeker from my deck, and Psybeast's level becomes 3. And finally, since I control a level 3 monster other than Psychic Wielder, I can special summon Psychic Wielder from my hand. I now tune my level 3 Psychic Wielder with my level 8 Master Gig. The raging hatred within me becomes black flame to burn this world to ashes. As he shouted, the massive demon behind him, both real and spectral, began to advance. The green inverted cross sigil on his forehead oozed dark energy, and in that instant, the children's voices fell silent. The monstrous psychic god pulled the tubes from its body, spreading them like wings. Synchro Summon. Level 11. His eyes gleamed green as he screamed with joy. Psychic End Punisher. Boom! The massive demon stepped forward from the laboratory. Its broken green wings flared with pale emerald fire like those of a true demon. The colossal demon finally stepped out of the laboratory. Its shattered green wings spread wide like those of a true devil, releasing a faint, scorching emerald flame. Psychic End Punisher, Level 11, Light, Psychic, ATK 3500. Wah! It's a success! We did it! Countless psychic users cheered, trembling with joy, as though they themselves were now part of the man-made god. And if they felt that way, why not let them keep celebrating? But then, Psychic End Punisher flapped its wings, and streams of green lightning rained from above, connecting to the bodies of those very same followers. Yes! Finally, I can be above everyone. Now I'll make those arrogant nobles kneel before me. Mom, your son has finally made it. At first, their shouts were full of ecstasy. But soon, something went terribly wrong. My head. Master Sayer, my psychic energy, it's draining. What's happening? Their bodies convulsed like charred wood in a fire. The moment the green lightning struck, they felt their psychic power fluctuate, and even these gifted psychics were instantly devoured by the demon, reduced to countless invisible fragments of ordinary matter. Humph! Fools! The only one who truly deserves power is me. This way, everything is fair, isn't it? Isn't that what you all wanted? Sayer's tone didn't even waver as he lied. Hikaru sneered. So you've dropped the act? Or are you just done pretending? Don't misunderstand, Sayer said smoothly. They're merely asleep, immersed in the sea of the psychic world. They're not dead. But you know as well as I do, people are selfish. If these gifted psychics ruled freely in the mental world, they'd oppress ordinary humans. Without a genius like me to control them, who else could? I've heard enough. Just continue your duel, Hikaru said flatly. He hadn't been interested in Sayer's delusions to begin with, but his opponent clearly loved to perform, so all Hikaru could do was let him finish. Ha. Then allow me to show you the power of our god. Psychic End Punisher's effect. I pay 1,000 life points and target one monster on my field and one card on yours, both are banished. He pointed to one of his own monsters, his little Psybeast, and one of Hikaru's face-down cards on the left. Those two cards are banished. Sayer, LP. 1750-750. Discarding your own monsters after they've served their purpose? Fitting for a hypocrite like you, Hikaru said casually, showing his banished card before setting it aside. Gemknight Fusion? A card that fuses using materials from the graveyard? Sayer smirked. Looks like I banished a good one. Now then, battle phase. I activate Psychic End Punisher's effect. He laughed wildly. At the start of either player's battle phase, this card gains ATK equal to the difference between our life points. My life points are 750, yours are 4,000, Psychic End Punisher's ATK increases by 3250. As it absorbed the blood and energy of the surrounding psychics, its metallic body glowed a blinding silver and it let out a bestial howl. Psychic End Punisher, ATK 3500 6750. 6750. Tiara's face grew pale. If that attack goes through, it's over for you, Hikaru. Even she couldn't hide her anxiety. A vicious smile crept across Sayer's face. He hadn't mentioned one more of the monster's effects. When his life points are lower than his opponent's, Psychic End Punisher is unaffected by the opponent's card effects. Meaning, no mirror force or any other trap could stop it. The victory was his. Battle. Psychic End Punisher, attack directly. The demon of the spiritual world leapt into the air, raising its right hand. From the void, it drew a brain-shaped blade and swung down toward Hikaru. At the moment your monster declares an attack, Hikaru said, calmly revealing a card from his hand, I activate this card's effect, special summon in defense position. Vampire Fräulein. Vampire Fräulein, level 5, dark, zombie, def 2000. It wouldn't withstand the attack, but as long as Hikaru avoided a direct hit, he'd be safe. You think I'd let that stop me? Sayer roared. Did you really think all 3 of my set cards were just recovery traps? I activate my trap, past image. He revealed the card he'd set last turn. If I control a face-up psychic monster, I target one monster your opponent controls, that monster is banished until the next standby phase, then returns to the field in the same position. His face twisted into madness. Sayer hadn't activated that trap card last turn. He had deliberately taken the damage, not only to lower his life points, but also because he thought there was no need to waste such a powerful card. That was the brilliance of his strategy. Open face-down card. Trap card, magic hats. But to his surprise, Hikaru immediately chained another trap. What? During your opponent's battle phase, I select 2 spell or trap cards from my deck. Those cards are treated as normal monsters with 0 ATK and DF, and along with one monster I control, they're shuffled, set face down, and placed in the main monster zones. Hikaru chose 2 spell cards from his deck, setting them on the field. Beside them, Vampire Fräulein yawned, raised her parasol lazily, and fell into a deep sleep. The 3 cards were swallowed by 3 giant hats, which began spinning rapidly before coming to rest on the field. Since your trap has lost its target, Hikaru said with a flick of his hand, its activation resolves with no effect. TCH, petty tricks. Sayer glared at the 3 huge hats, though he didn't seem alarmed. Humph, no matter. Attack the one on the right. Psychic End Punisher raised its claw and hurled a spear of violet psychic energy. The hat burst open, revealing Vampire Duke, forced back onto the field. I told you, I'm a genius. No, I'm the king of psychics. No. I am God. The next one true god of this world. You think a simple sleight of hand can fool me? My psychic power can see through all illusions. He actually looked proud of himself for psychically cheating. I activate Vampire Fräulein's effect. I pay 3,000 life points to increase his ATK and DF. Hikaru, LP, 4,000 1,000. Humph. Even if it had 5,000 DEF, my Punisher can easily crush it. Indeed, even with its boost, Vampire Fräulein couldn't withstand the attack. The demonic giant slashed through it, and the vampire scattered into a cloud of bats before vanishing. Sayer looked completely satisfied. Hikaru's field was empty, his fusion materials destroyed, and his hands seemingly bare. He had no monsters, no field presence, and no future. It's over. Wait. What? At this point, what could he possibly do? Could this dimensional traveler be planning to use a trap on the Punisher? Ha, that would be perfect. I activate the quick play spell, Metalphos Fusion. What? Sayer froze, stunned. Even if I ignore what that card is, you have no fusion materials on the field. You don't even have any Metalphos in your graveyard. What's the point of activating that card? Who said I don't have any fusion materials on the field? What? Sayer blinked in confusion. My field still has 2 monsters with 0 ATK and DF, doesn't it? Wah! He looked again at the 2 massive hats remaining on Hikaru's field. No way. That's right. The monsters special summoned by magic hats are treated as normal monsters. Those 2 are the normal monsters' Metalphos Fusion and Polymerization. I'll fuse the two of them together. Fusing? Fusions? Sayer shouted, eyes wide in disbelief. Impossible. You can't. Oh, but I can, Hikaru said with a smile. Fusion is the noblest summoning method. Not only monsters, even spells and traps can become materials for fusion. I fuse Metalfoes Fusion and the other 0 ATK monster. Fusion summon, my assistant, my partner. Metalfoes Adamanti. Boom! Two blazing flames erupted, twisting together into a whirl of molten metal. A warrior wielding twin blades stepped out from the spinning hat, as if it had been waiting there all along. Ha! Master, I never expected to appear in this form. Truly, you're amazing. Adamanti's voice rang out proudly. Metalfoes Adamanti, Level 5, Fire, Fusion, ATK 2500. Sayer's emotions swung wildly, shock, disbelief, frustration, all within seconds. But finally, he just shook his head. Oof. So what? His psychic end Punisher was the card born from his enlightenment in the mental world, the ultimate power he had dreamed of. As long as it stood, victory was inevitable. What could a 2500 ATK monster possibly do? That dimensional invader had no cards in hand, no tricks left to play. Victory was his. My turn. Draw. Hikaru drew a card, glancing at it casually before pointing toward his graveyard. I activate the effect of Fusion Substitute in my graveyard. I banish it to return one fusion monster from my graveyard to the extra deck, then draw one card. I return Gem Knight Prismora. Then I activate the effect of Metalfoes Fusion in the graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, and draw one card. Sayer frowned. In an instant, Hikaru had replenished two cards in hand. Do you see the difference between you and me? Hikaru asked calmly, holding up his three new cards. We both set 3 cards on our first turn. You preached about guidance and enlightenment, but all you ever did was drain others dry and discard them. I, on the other hand, he said, eyes sharp, have been fusing from start to finish. The same 3 cards, but you only used yours to show off. Sayer smirked dismissively. Meaningless. Hikaru glanced at his hand again. Then it's about time I finished this. What? Sayer's brows furrowed. I activate the effect of my face-up scatter fusion. When my opponent controls a monster, I send materials from my deck to the graveyard listed on a non-rock type Gem Knight fusion monster, and fusion summon that monster from my extra deck. The fusion materials are Gem Knight Garnet and one other Gem Knight monster. I send Gem Knight Garnet and Gem Knight Lazuli from my deck to the graveyard to fusion summon. Come forth, Gem Knight Ruby. A Crimson Knight swung his sapphire-lined cape with pride as he landed. Gem Knight Ruby, Level 6, Earth Attribute, Pyrotype, ATK 2500. Lazuli's effect. When sent to the graveyard by a card effect, I can target one normal monster in my graveyard and add it to my hand. I choose Garnet. Then I normal summon Gem Knight Garnet. Gem Knight Garnet, Level 4, Earth Attribute, Pyrotype, ATK 1900. But I'm not done yet. I activate the continuous spell Brilliant Fusion. When activated, I send fusion materials listed on a Gem Knight fusion monster from my deck to the graveyard, and special summon that fusion monster, but its ATK and def becomes 0. I send Gem Knight Sapphire and Gem Knight Lazuli from my deck to the graveyard to fusion summon Gem Knight Zirconia. Gem Knight Zirconia, Level 8, Earth/Rock type, ATK 2900 0. Next, I activate the spell Fusion tag. I target one monster I control, reveal one fusion monster from my extra deck, and that monster's name becomes the revealed monster's name until the end of this turn. I reveal Metalfoes Adamanti and make it count as Gem Knight Lapis Lazuli. Ha! This fusion, that fusion, it's meaningless. Just renaming a monster won't change a thing. My Psychic End Punisher is immune to all your activated effects. No card effect can touch it. Hikaru smiled faintly. You ever heard this saying? Battle is the best way to break through. The fusion materials, 3 Gem Knights. I activate the spell card Particle Fusion. I send fusion materials from my field to the graveyard to fusion summon. I fuse Gemnite Ruby, Gemnite Lapis Lazuli, and Gemnite Zirconia. The three knights began to spin and merge, their crystals grinding together into one blazing diamond. O King who shines upon the duel with radiant light, absorb the power of your comrades and reveal your true form. Fusion Summon. The King of Gemnites. The ultimate form of the White Crystal Knight. Level 9 Gemnite Master Diamond. Light exploded across the field. The knight forged of every color stood proudly, raising his jewel-encrusted greatsword high, its blade shimmering brighter than the sun itself. Gemnite Master Diamond, Level 9, Earth/Rock Type, ATK 2900. He stepped forward gallantly before Hikaru, bowing slightly. My liege. I have long awaited this moment. This sword shall behead the wicked. Hikaru chuckled softly. Ha! I prepared this stage especially for you. The effect of particle fusion. If this card was used to fusion summon, I can banish it from my graveyard to target one Gemnite fusion monster used as material for that summon. Until the end of this turn, my monster gains ATK equal to that monster's original ATK. I target Zirconia. Gemnite Master Diamond, ATK 2900 5800. 5800 ATK. Humph, still not enough. My psychic end Punisher is the god of the mental world. A mere knight. I'm not done yet. Master Diamond's own effect. For each Gemnite monster in my graveyard, it gains 100 ATK. I have Gemnite Garnet, Prismora, Sapphire, Ruby, Zirconia, Lazuli, and Lapis, 7 in total. That's plus 700 ATK. Gemnite Master Diamond, ATK 5800 6500. Sayer flinched, stepping back instinctively. This pressure, could it be rising even higher? Even at 6500, it's useless. My Punisher's ATK is 6750. And since your life points are still higher than mine by 250, his ATK will climb to 7000. In a duel, higher ATK is higher. Even 1 point decides victory. Ha! I activate Master Diamond's effect again. I banish one level 7 or lower Gemnite fusion monster from my graveyard. Until the end phase, this card's name becomes that monster's name and it gains its effects. I banish Gemnite Ruby. Master Diamond, ATK 6500 6400. Ha! You even reduced your own attack power. But Ruby's effect, once per turn, I contribute another face-up gem monster I control to have this card gain ATK equal to the tribute monster's ATK until the end of this turn. Sayer's eyes widened as he looked at the remaining Gemnite Garnet, the monster he'd dismissed as irrelevant. Impossible. He muttered, face twisting in disbelief. No way, how can you always draw exactly what you need? Hikaru looked around slowly, sensing unseen eyes watching from the mental plane. Why don't you ask yourself that? Master Diamond. Tribute Garnet. Increase ATK by 1900 plus the previous 100 bonus. Gemnite Master Diamond, ATK 6400 8400. E8000. Sayer stumbled backward helplessly. He'd burned too much life, there was no way he could withstand that hit. W8. If you attack, the psychic batteries connected to my Punisher will all explode, those children will die. Hikaru raised an eyebrow and glanced to the side. Before he could answer, a voice rang out. Don't worry. A tall, blonde man stood atop the platform, Jack. Beside him was a shy, country-looking girl nervously waving. I've already severed every link between those kids and your machine. He raised his right hand, glowing faintly red. You can trust me on this, right? What? Damn it, where are my guards? My psychic soldiers. Ha! Idiot, Jack sneered from above. You forgot, didn't you? All those with selfish desires, you banished them yourself. Sayer's mouth fell open in shock, finally realizing the irony of his own purge. Ha! Then, prepare for your judgment, Sayer. Battle phase. It doesn't matter how high your Punisher's ATK climbs. Master Diamond. Cut down the wicked. The White Crystal Knight had long awaited the command. He raised his massive sword, each embedded gem lighting up one by one until the entire blade shone like a rainbow. A sword larger than even the Psychic End Punisher itself descended from the heavens. Boom! The false paradise split apart, the roof torn in two. The Psychic End Punisher didn't even resist, it was cleaved clean in half. Then the great sword struck down upon Sayer. Boom! Ah-ha-ha! Sayer clutched his head, writhing in agony. Sayer LP, 750. But even after his life points dropped to 0, the mental projection of the Punisher didn't vanish. Its bisected body remained, refusing to disappear. Wait, stop. I'm your master. Don't come any closer. Sayer screamed in horror. He knew exactly what was happening. The Psychic End Punisher had been born from his dream, a vision granted by a dark, faceless being. Now, without the psychic battery sustaining it, the spirit demon was unstable, seeking to consume a new source of power. It would devour the closest psychic, the closest loser. And who else fit both descriptions? The mutilated demon grabbed Sayer. He struggled wildly, slapping its claws in terror, but it was useless. The creature swallowed him whole. Carly covered one eye in fright, but her other hand instinctively snapped photo after photo. In the air, everyone could almost see it, a man surrounded by countless spirits, curling in fear as he screamed, "No, stay away, stay away." The demon slowly dissolved. But within the spiritual world, Sayer still existed, trapped within the demon's soul, tormented endlessly by the very psychics he'd exploited. Everything he had taken pride in would be stripped away, and in that tiny, twisted mental realm, Sayer would forever remain the lowest of the low. Chapter 476, Generous. After the duel, Hikaru stepped toward the place where Sayer had fallen. He bent down and picked up the duel disc that had rolled to the floor. Although most of the cards were useless to him, there were still some things worth examining. His gaze fell upon the one card still slotted in the disc. That card. Jack's face hardened. It really does look like, he said, an artificial god. As Tiara explained, Hikaru picked the card up carefully. Thick, visible black smoke coiled from its surface, streaked with erratic green lightning arcs. Hikaru silently reached out with his dual energy to sense it. When he'd once dueled the mind-controlled Rhodes, the residual energy afterward had been so immense it nearly knocked him unconscious. Now, though the dark energy was still overwhelming, it no longer fazed him as it once had. Still, the power within this card was unmistakable. It was darkness's power. Just like before, the card's Psychic End Punisher bore the same eerie aura as the cursed mask card that had once tormented Rhodes. Hikaru cautiously took out the Emerald Grimoire and sealed the card inside. This was valuable alchemical material. After all, his previous card forging experiments had relied on similar samples of darkness's essence. It was thanks to that energy that he'd successfully fused El Shaddol Winda back then. He had once sought out the Seven Stars duelists to harvest their dual energy for his research, but few of them, not even Professor Growler, possessed such power. And now, darkness had reappeared. But unlike before, this time darkness had learned from its failure. Perhaps it had realized that it lacked true dueling talent, so instead of fighting directly, it had chosen to guide humans to destroy themselves. From a certain perspective, that approach had worked rather well. In this world, the existence of artificial gods was recognized. If Sayer had been left alone to keep developing his salvation cult, then when the end times finally came, he might have deceived a large portion of humanity, especially those desperate souls who'd already given up on life. Tiara folded her arms and shook her head. A pity. The card itself is complete, but the so-called god was only a prototype. She could see immediately that this card wasn't something Sayer himself had created. Its energy was eerily similar to what they'd once encountered from the cosmic entity light of destruction, but the resonance was inverted. To make such a being truly divine, far more was required. Even a full laboratory like this could never produce a real god. To raise an artificial god to true divinity, it would need countless minds bound into a shared mental world. 10, 20 people, that was nowhere near enough. And now that the mental demon had been physically bisected in the duel, its power was shattered. It would never ascend again. That, Tiara noted, was the fundamental flaw of any artificial god. Hikaru's eyes drifted to Jack and Carly. If in this world both the signers and the dark signers were destined to converge because of the one god phenomenon, then anyone trying to artificially create a god would inevitably collide with those chosen by fate. In the original timeline, Sayer had used his psychic powers to hurl Carly off a high-rise, killing her, only for her to be resurrected as a dark signer chosen by the earthbound gods, returning to destroy him in a shadow duel. Things had turned out differently here, but Carly was still present, and this time, Jack had been with her. Perhaps even if Hikaru hadn't intervened, Sayer would have faced the same fate at the hands of countless duelists. Unless, by some miracle, he'd defeated every signer and dark signer, then maybe he could have truly become the herald of the one god. But even without reaching that point, this card alone was valuable. Once dismantled, its core could serve as the base material for Tiara's greatest creation, Lilith, and the excess fragments could be recycled into other alchemic constructs. "How are the children?" Hikaru asked, stowing the grimoire away. Jack, standing protectively in front of Carly, replied, "They'll be fine." "That's good." Hikaru nodded. "You should have enough resources in the upper city to find proper shelter for them, right?" In his memory, almost every male protagonist from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds was fond of children. UCI had taught the satellite kids, Crow took in orphans to earn a living, even Jack, though a self-proclaimed bum, was famous as the king of the kids, adored and idolized by them. "You're Hikaru from the F dimension, right?" "Ha, why does everyone like starting conversations that way?" Crow from the lower city opened the same way. "You met Crow?" "Wait." Jack suddenly recalled a news report. Though he'd been confined to the hospital ward, he'd never stopped tracking UCI's whereabouts. "Don't tell me that interdimensional duelist UCI rescued, was that you?" Hikaru nodded once. Jack immediately rushed forward, grabbed him by the collar, and demanded sharply, "You've seen UCI? Where is he? What is he planning?" "Jack! Don't be so rude!" Carly cried out, flailing her hands, too scared to step between them. Hikaru calmly pried Jack's hand away. Even though Jack could normally take on 10 men at once, Hikaru could tell right away that his body wasn't in perfect shape, still strong, but clearly weakened. Even so, when Jack realized Hikaru could actually resist his grip, his eyes widened slightly. "Sorry," Hikaru said evenly. "Even if you ask me, I don't know. I only met him once." "TCH?" Jack released him, frustrated. Of course. Even Leo and Luna hadn't heard from UCI. Not Jack, not Crow, not Akiza. He'd vanished from the public eye entirely. Whatever UCI was doing, there was no way he'd tell an interdimensional stranger he'd met once. Jack sighed, then looked at Hikaru's left hand, where the crimson mark gleamed faintly. A dark signer. But, considering he'd gone out of his way to challenge Sayer and even UCI had helped him once, he probably wasn't evil. Seeing Jack relax, Hikaru smiled faintly and gestured toward the ruin lab. "Let's walk and talk. First, we should check who's still alive in there." Jack nodded. "Right." Jack suddenly understood and strode forward in long, powerful steps. Carly hurried to keep up beside him. Hikaru followed them into the laboratory. Inside, he saw a honeycomb-like maze of white cells, each one connected by narrow pipes that extended out to the rest of the facility. Sayer, that bastard, hadn't even bothered to give the children proper rooms. To save money and space, he'd crammed them into half-height transparent cells stacked together in small sublabs. Hikaru's expression darkened immediately. He and Jack moved toward the main control area. On the floor lay several groaning guards, clearly the ones Jack had knocked out earlier while freeing the children. They looked pitiful. Jack had obviously pulled no punches, yet in a twisted way, they were the lucky ones. If they'd still been conscious during the battle, the psychic demon might have eaten them alive. Carly kept taking photos, documenting every bit of evidence she could. Hikaru turned to the lab's main console and noticed something unusual, a Duel Monsters card embedded in the connection port. He carefully slid it out and examined it. Huh? His eyes widened. Looking around the room again, Hikaru spotted more of the same kind of cards. Each sublab, each major conduit point, had one inserted, like nodes in a psychic network. As expected of darkness. How generous. Chapter 477, Full Set. The full set. Hikaru murmured, a strange look on his face as he counted through all the cards he'd gathered. These cards, used as keys, seals, and connection nodes throughout the laboratory, were slotted into nearly every section of the machinery. Once Hikaru had finished collecting them all, he began checking every device in the room himself. Even though Tiara had already scanned most of the systems during the duel, Hikaru insisted on verifying everything again. When innocent lives were involved, he never trusted anyone's word but his own. Once the last of the surviving children were freed, he turned his attention to the cards he'd recovered. It was nearly a complete set of mutant chimera variants. Hikaru raised an eyebrow. Every one of the cards from the Chimera variant series was here, except for the Ultimate Fusion, Mutant Ultimus. Not just the low-level monsters, 3 level 8 non-psychic variants, 2 fusion monsters, and even their spell and trap cards, the entire series had been stored here in one place. Although there was only one copy of each, Hikaru already carried a backup fusion card in his reserve deck, so the limited numbers didn't bother him. What mattered more was the quantity, the sheer fact that he'd stumbled upon the entire lineup at once. Tiara glanced over the cards, then suddenly spoke as understanding dawned on her face. A double safeguard, she said. That psychic end Punisher of theirs may have qualified for godhood, but putting a god in human hands is always a risk. So darkness created a fallback plan. Hikaru looked at her sharply. Fallback? These cards, Tiara continued, served as control nodes to link and amplify the psychic end Punisher, but in truth, the end Punisher itself was their disguise. Hikaru looked down again. Each of the cards shimmered faintly, thin wisps of dark smoke curling across the surface, visible only if you stared long enough. They were darkness cards too. Darkness, the power once wielded by Nightshroud, had the ability to overwrite existing Duel Monsters cards directly, even altering entire decks. It was the same phenomenon that had once affected Atticus Rhodes. The world considered Red Ice Black Dragon a near mythically rare card, yet under Darkness's influence, Atticus's deck could produce 3 copies at will. Whether he wanted to or not, until he fully mastered the darkness, he was bound to it. That was the tyranny of the darkness force. Sayer's cards had been forged under the same principle. He'd been given a full set, not for dueling glory, but to make his experiments succeed. Tiara folded her arms, her voice low and thoughtful. Good thing it was you who found them, Hikaru. These cards depict the moment the test subjects broke containment and destroyed the lab, the birth of an evolved form. If an uninformed duelist had defeated Sayer in the psychic end Punisher like you did, even destroying the demon wouldn't have truly stopped the plan. Because the end Punisher was only a goalpost. If the artificial spirit world experiment failed, Darkness would have used the demon's corpse as a trigger, letting these experimental entities awaken and transform into godlike living beings. Hikaru studied the single pitch-black card in his hand. On its face, nothing but darkness. But when he tilted it toward the light, faint, writhing tendrils could be seen shifting within. It wasn't complete yet, but its nature was clear. Mutant Ultimus. That card was powerful, one of Hikaru's personal favorites. Even its basic effect rivaled Invoked Makaba in strength. But its fusion requirements were much harsher, 3 level 8 or higher Chimera variant monsters. Should it ever take the field, it could banish cards from the graveyard to negate effects of the same type, stronger even than Makaba, which required discarding from the hand. Darkness's essence still smoldered faintly across its surface. As Tiara had explained, this backup plan was unfinished. If more time had passed, or if the Psychic Inn Punisher hadn't been removed, the card might have fully manifested, transforming into a true monster. A living disaster. Unfortunately for Darkness, Hikaru was already well versed in its tricks. He tore the entire laboratory apart from top to bottom, checking every conduit, panel, and console himself. When it came to schemes, hypnosis, and double-layered traps, Darkness was a master. But this time, Hikaru's thoroughness paid off. He uncovered several hidden systems that, if left untouched, could have triggered a catastrophe in New Domino City's upper districts. Now, before any of those traps could even activate, they were already gone. Even better, Hikaru realized he could finish charging the incomplete Ultimus using dual energy alone. It would take time, but the process was stable, safe, and completely under his control. This was the first time he'd ever obtained a full fusion archetype so quickly, efficiently, and completely. Nearby, Carly had finished taking photographs and was already thinking about how to write the article. Jack had checked on the children and, seeing they were safe, finally looked at Hikaru with a softer expression. Even if Hikaru bore the mark of a dark signer, it was clear he wasn't one of the bad ones. Jack. I've contacted the hospital and security. Carly shouted from across the hall, waving. Jack nodded, then turned back toward Hikaru, more precisely, toward the fusion cards in his hands. Fusion monsters, huh? So that's what brought you here, to collect the ones your world doesn't have. And because you were strong enough to draw attention, you got targeted by an earthbound immortal. Tough luck, huh? Hikaru laughed lightly. What I'm after is the act of fusion itself, the process of combining what shouldn't coexist. Coming to your world gave me the chance to see that firsthand. Of course I wasn't going to pass it up. He slipped the cards neatly into his deck box, still smiling. As for the cost, that's not something I worry about. Jack started to respond, but then noticed one of the children beginning to wake. He decided to let it go, tossing a small card case toward Hikaru instead. Hikaru caught it with one hand and flipped it open. That's an upper city access pass, Jack said. I don't know how you got past sector security the first time, but even you can't move through the inner zones unnoticed. That pass'll get you into the city proper, works for one person only. Oh? Much appreciated. Hikaru grinned, tucking the pass away. The police and medics should be on their way, right? Since security's already after me, I'd better make myself scarce before they show up. He already knew what he had to do next. He'd found traces of Nightshroud's power here, and that meant his goal was clear: eliminate every remnant of darkness left in this world and weaken it before it reached his own dimension. And beyond that, there were two other matters he couldn't ignore: Dragonecro Nethersal Dragon, and Mudragon of the Swamp. Those three objectives now defined his path. Hikaru raised a hand in casual farewell and turned to leave. Jack stood in silence for a moment, then called out. You have any other leads? Carly froze, blinking. As Jack turned to check the children again, she suddenly gasped. Wait, that reminds me. Back when I was covering that story at the criminal detention center, I saw people there with the same kind of black mark that guy had on his hand. Jack nodded slowly. The prison, huh? Not far away, Hikaru also nodded to himself, having overheard. Looks like that's the next stop. Chapter 478, Summary of the Current Situation. Hikaru returned to his temporary base of operations. Tonight's mission had been immensely fruitful, so much so that he decided to halt his current work and take some time to refine the Emerald Grimoire's connection system. And once that idea crossed his mind, he was already acting on it. It was late. Chaz didn't seem to have time to drop by, and Hikaru himself was too busy. Before he could dive into his alchemy calculations, he needed to organize his thoughts. Inside the hideout that UCI had once used for D-wheel testing, Hikaru looked up at a massive map pinned to the wall, a complete layout of the city. At the very bottom of the map, a single mark read "You are here." That was the current base, the same location UCI had labeled when he first mapped out the city's underground. Above that area lay the vast stretch of territory where the lower-class citizens lived, the underground sector, or simply the ground. On the left side of that level was the Psychic Research Facility, Eden, the place Hikaru had visited earlier that day. In contrast, on the upper right edge of the same layer sat the detention center, the local prison. The nobility of the upper city despised seeing the pollution of the lower class, so they'd exiled both independent institutions like Eden and government prisons to the far outskirts, sealing them off from sight. This whole layer was known as the isolation zone. The city itself was built as a spiraling tower, a literal structure of hierarchy. The underground sector wasn't only a social designation, it was physically beneath everything else. Technically, there were 3 ways upward. The first 2 were the slanted surface paths, like the ones Hikaru had driven today, and then a vertical transit corridor connecting directly to the upper city. That last route, however, was heavily guarded by sector security. The last time Hikaru tested his D-wheel there, that was where he'd been discovered. When he had driven to the city's edge earlier and looked back, he could see the city like a tilted spire rising toward the heavens, its districts connected by countless looping raceways. Beyond the lower levels, the architecture rose into a geometric hexagonal pattern, a honeycomb of elevated districts. If the underground and isolation zones were restricted areas, then moving higher meant entering the middle layer, the commoner district. This was the largest region of the city aside from the underground itself. Above that resided the true upper city, home of the aristocrats. Only a few landmarks on the upper tiers bore names. At the pinnacle stood the Taichi Gardens, and to the northeast, just beneath the floating plaza, was the Perpetual Motion Research Institute. The rest were left blank, anonymous strongholds of privilege. Hikaru rubbed his chin thoughtfully. If he numbered the layers, he was now standing on level 10. Above him was 9, the lower sector, then 8 Eden, 7, the prison, and so on. A frown creased his brow. Those numbers, something about them felt strange. Beside him, Tiara lounged back with her hands folded behind her head. For once, she didn't offer a single comment. Hikaru studied the map for a long time before shaking his head and forcing himself to stop overthinking. He needed to focus and plan tomorrow's route to the detention center. That place, yes, it rang a bell. In the original Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, the prison had been an important location. Coincidentally, it also appeared in Arc V, a recurring main character prison stop, where heroes inevitably found themselves locked up at least once. It was always a key story hub, full of hidden connections. In Arc V, the underground duelist Chojiro Tokunatsu had been one such inmate, a street duelist who rose to fame by teaching children to duel instead of fight, earning the affection of the satellite's poor. He had come to despise the aristocrats who shouted hollow slogans about equality yet never listened to the cries of the commons. Hating the way society had been split between classes, Chojiro challenged duelists from the upper sector directly. In his desperation to win, to claim justice for the downtrodden, he eventually crossed the line. He cheated. And for that, he was arrested. A duelist with ideals, but one whose edges had been worn down by the weight of reality. From what Hikaru had learned of the synchro dimension so far, that man should be imprisoned somewhere inside the detention center. If even Sayer had once been drawn into the struggle for the so-called one true god, then perhaps Chojiro would soon be involved too. After all, in the original story he was one of the most pivotal figures in the synchro arc, no less significant than Shinji. Having mapped his route, Hikaru uploaded the navigation data into his dual disk and began reviewing his deck. He hadn't had time to inspect it properly in days, and as he flipped through the cards, something unfamiliar caught his eye. Ha! Teleport fusion. Hikaru blinked, pulling out a brand new fusion spell. Another new card. But since he'd already encountered original cards like Gemknight Dispersion, it wasn't entirely shocking. He examined the effect text carefully. During either player's main phase, banish psychic-type monsters from your field or graveyard to fusion summon one psychic fusion monster. He nodded slightly. Not bad. A clean banish-based fusion spell. The rest of the effect read. If a psychic-type fusion monster you control that was special summoned from the extra deck is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your GY, then special summon one of your banished psychic monsters. Oh, that's actually pretty solid, Hikaru muttered with approval. It wasn't as astonishing as Gemnite dispersion, but it had its own charm, perfect for combining with the mutant Ultimus he'd obtained earlier, or even to mix with metal foes. At the very least, it was one more fusion spell to add to his arsenal. Unfortunately, his extra deck hadn't expanded. Apparently his duel with Sayer hadn't earned him a new fusion monster, only this spell as a byproduct. Still, Hikaru wasn't greedy. Today's harvest had already far exceeded expectations. A new fusion spell was just a welcome bonus. The next morning, after an entire night spent experimenting, Hikaru stifled a yawn, mounted his D-wheel, and set off toward the prison. He hadn't even made it halfway when... boom! A massive explosion thundered through the air. His eyes widened as a blue-black mushroom cloud rose in the distance. That was the direction of the detention center. An explosion. Chapter 479, Shelter. When Hikaru arrived at the scene, the sky was thick with black smoke, and the heavy stench of gunpowder made him want to cough. He saw countless ragged people wearing dual discs, gripping iron rods and pipes, locked in a desperate struggle with the security forces. Hikaru stood still, silently observing from a distance. A riot? Or was Shinji trying to rescue one of the Resistance's key members? He thought for a moment. If that was the case, it would be better not to get involved. He parked his D-wheel at the side of the road, and among the chaos, he spotted Crow Hogan. It looked like Crow had followed Shinji here. Not far away, Shinji Weber stood with his arm raised, shouting passionately. "Brothers! Now's our chance. Raise your dual discs and show those upper-class pigs our courage." "Yeah!" The Resistance members roared in response, charging toward the detention center in a furious wave. Crow watched, face twisted with pain, but his reason kept him from intervening. At this point, it didn't matter that the prison also held real criminals. What mattered was rescuing their friends trapped inside. Seeing Crow remain silent, Shinji didn't thank him. He simply picked up a loudspeaker and continued to rally the crowd. The dark signer mark on his left hand glowed faintly, pulsing with energy. Boom! Before he could say another word, another explosion ripped through the detention center. "Shinji! That's enough! Stop using explosives, you'll hurt your own people." "No, no! That wasn't me. I never planted any bombs." Even Shinji froze in disbelief. Crash! A man in a security uniform was thrown out of the wreckage. And right after him emerged a white-haired man with a twisted grin, laughing wildly as he stepped through the smoke and fire. "Mr. Kalen." Seeing him, Shinji's expression lit up with relief and excitement. "You've come to help us, haven't you?" Although Kalen looked completely deranged, Shinji still wanted to believe in him. After all, it was Kalen who had given him the means to rise up against the upper city, and Kalen, like him, bore the mark of a dark signer. He was his guide, and his idol. But to Crow, this was something else entirely. "Kalen, what the hell are you doing?" Kalen jumped down from the debris, his grin stretching wider under the flickering firelight. "Ha! What do you think I'm doing? Revenge!" He walked over to the fallen security officer, kicking him hard. "Hey, bastard, do you remember me?" The officer, dazed and bloodied, looked up at him in confusion. Who are you?" The manic grin on Kalen's face vanished. Then his expression twisted into fury. He kicked the man again and again. "You filthy scum! I'm the duelist from the slums you murdered. Try to remember me, you worthless dog." He stomped on the man, over and over. He had come for revenge, to find the man who had killed him. But when he finally found him, the man didn't even remember who he was. TCH. How unsatisfying. Not the least bit satisfying, but that's fine. He grabbed the guard by the throat, lifting him into the air. As the officer choked and gasped, Kalen's twisted smile returned. "Revenge isn't something you do just once. You have to make it last, draw it out, until it feels good." And as his words fell, boom! Another explosion thundered through the facility. A surge of deep blue light erupted from within, blasting the detention center apart. Mr. Kalen! There are still our comrades inside. Shinji cried out in horror. Kalen, stop this. Nobody wants to see you like this. Kalen broke into wild laughter that echoed down the alleyway. Then, with a sharp motion, he hurled the sector security officer to the ground and roared at Crow, "And who do you think made me this way? You punks teamed up with security to throw me in a cell. Didn't it ever cross your minds that this day would come? Sector security? What are you talking about, Kalen?" Kalen let out a low, mocking laugh. He took a few steps forward and slammed his boot down on the officer's throat, clearly ready to finish him off. BZZT. Just then, a streak of red lightning ripped across the street. A dual runner roared past, its slipstream forcing Kalen back. Crow dashed forward, grabbing the officer and hauling him out of danger. Normally, Kalen would have exploded in rage, screaming, chasing Crow down, but this time was different. He looked toward the parked dual runner nearby, and for the first time in years, smiled. A real, genuine smile. Like an older brother seeing an old friend again. UCI, it's been a long time. UCI stayed astride his runner, his face unreadable. I knew it, he said quietly. No matter how deep you hide, once someone digs up your secrets, you always show yourself. UCI let out a long breath, glancing toward Hikaru standing nearby. You doing okay out here? Hikaru nodded. Sorry you had to see this, UCI said to him softly. These are our mistakes. Then he turned back to Kalen, his tone serious. When sector security took you away, we wanted to save you. Save me? Kalen snarled. Then why did I die alone, without seeing a single one of you? And don't give me that garbage, it was you who ratted me out. The warmth vanished from Kalen's face, replaced by the same deranged smile born from darkness, the mark of the dark signers. No. It wasn't like that. UCI shot back. That security officer just talked to me that day. None of us betrayed you. Ha, even now you can lie to my face, huh? Kalen sneered. You really are the new king. Looks like you're ready to join the upper class of New Domino City. If that's true, then why have you been hiding from me all this time? Shinji stood frozen, staring at the two men. One was his mentor. The other, the satellite's greatest pride. Which of them was right? And yet... Deep down, he found himself wanting to believe Kalen. Just like when he'd argued with Crow before, if UCI really stood with the people of Satellite, then why had he disappeared? Why hadn't anyone seen him for so long? Why? Where had UCI gone? If he wasn't in the Satellite anymore, then he must have gone up to the city, to live among the privileged. I'm sorry, UCI said at last, regret weighing in every word. There were things I had to do. More important things. He clenched his fists, frustrated that he couldn't put his friend's soul to rest. Kalen raised his arm, the dark signer mark glowing bright on his skin. So you're still pretending to be the savior of your chosen ones, huh? Fine then. A storm of dark blue mist burst outward from around him, spreading fast. UCI twisted the throttle of his dual runner, then exhaled slowly. All right then. Chapter 480, Scarecrow. It was a world of pure white. A man with spiky hair shaped suspiciously like a crab sat on a wooden bench, staring out at a barren wasteland stretching endlessly before him. The end of the world. I'll never let it come to this, he thought. UCI. Kalen? The crab head slowly opened his eyes. Up above, a blond man leaned out from a helicopter, staring in disbelief at the two figures on the ground. Jack Atlas stood at the open cabin door, eyes wide. Inside the chopper with him were a sector security pilot, his partner Officer Mina, and the reporter Carly, who had been following the explosions rocking the area. From his vantage point, Jack could finally see what had been hidden all this time, UCI standing on the ground below, and beside him, laughing like a madman, was a familiar face, Kalen. Ha ha ha. What a day, huh? Kalen's laughter echoed through the wasteland as he glanced up at the helicopter, then at Crow's parked dual runner, and finally turned to UCI. His grin stretched wider. Looks like team enforcers all here. His laughter was so unnerving that Carly yelped and grabbed Jack's sleeve. Jack! What's happening down there? Jack frowned, saying nothing, eyes fixed on the battlefield below. Meanwhile, Hikaru pulled up beside Crow's dual runner, both stopping near the ruins to watch. On the other side, Shinji Weber stood apart from the rebel fighters, clearly waiting for the duel to begin. UCI and Kalen both brought their runners to a halt. A wave of eerie violet fire burst from the ground between them, spreading into a massive ring of flames. From above, Jack's eyes widened. He could see it, etched into the earth, a gigantic blue humanoid sigil pulsing with energy. The Dark Signer mark. He muttered, his face darkening. On the field, UCI remained calm. He hadn't even taken off his helmet. From the moment he'd arrived, he'd stayed on his runner, clearly ready for this duel. But before the battle that would drag him into the war of the Earthbound Immortals began, he had one more thing to say. Hikaru. Hikaru blinked in surprise. Why's he calling me? This was supposed to be an old friend's duel, what did it have to do with him? He'd been about to tune his calculations for an alchemy formula. What is it, UCI? After this duel, I want to ask you a favor. UCI raised his left hand slightly, his eyes flicking toward Hikaru's. It's about your Dark Signer mark. Hikaru's eyes widened, then he smiled faintly. Ha, well, that works out perfectly. That would save him some effort later. Kalen grinned wickedly. Still thinking about after the duel, UCI? You don't have to worry about that, because you're gonna die right here. He slammed his hand onto his dual runner's console. UCI pressed his button in response. Duel mode engaged. 3, 2, 1. Turbo duel. Accelerate. Vroom. Both dual runners shot forward almost in unison, their engines howling as they raced along the glowing sigil on the ground. It was like looking into a mirror, two riders, identical in precision and speed. Kalen sneered. Noticing UCI matching his pace without faltering even a little surprised him, but he laughed it off. Ha ha ha. Since you're so eager for the first move, I'll let you have it. He eased off the throttle, and as they banked into a turn, UCI surged ahead. UCI Fudo, LP, 4000. Kalen Kessler, LP, 4000. My turn. I draw. UCI drew his first card and slid it into his dual disc. I activate the spell card Tuning. Tuning lets me add one Synchron Tuner monster from my deck to my hand, then send the top card of my deck to the graveyard. He searched his deck, took a card, and held it up. I add Junk Synchron to my hand. After placing a card into his graveyard slot, his eyes narrowed slightly at what he saw sent there. When I control no monsters, I can special summon this card from my hand. Come forth, Quick Draw Synchron. From a burst of light, a metallic warrior in scrap armor appeared, dashing alongside UCI's runner. Junk forward level 3/Earth/Warrior/ATK 900. Next, I normal summon my tuner monster, Junk Synchron. A warrior in yellow armor and goggles appeared, gears whirring on his shoulders. Junk Synchron, level 3/Dark/Warrior type/ATK 1300. When Junk Synchron is normal summoned, I can special summon a level 2 or lower monster from my graveyard in defense position. Its effects are negated. I special summon Rush Warrior from my graveyard. A gust of wind swept across the wasteland. Rush Warrior, level 2, wind attribute, warrior, ATK 300. Kalen sneered, arms crossed. Poof. Is that all you've got, UCI? UCI didn't flinch. I tune my level 3 Junk Synchron with level 3 Junk Forward and level 2 Rush Warrior. Junk Synchron pulled the valve on his arm, his body turned translucent and burst into stars that circled the other monsters, forming glowing emerald rings. The gathered wishes will become a shining new star. Become the path its light shines upon, Synchro summon. Take flight, Stardust Dragon. A fierce gale surged upward. A majestic dragon cloaked in starlight burst from the swirling wind, ascending into the sky as shimmering motes of light rained down. Stardust Dragon, level 8/wind/dragon/ATK 2500. Kalen laughed maniacally. Ha! So that's your dragon, the mark of the signers? Not bad, ha, that's more like it. Now this will be satisfying. Kalen! UCI called out over the roar of engines. He didn't look forward, his visor gleamed blue beneath his helmet. We still owe you everything. Kalen's smile faltered. His expression darkened. What? As UCI's words hung in the air, Jack finally spoke from the helicopter above, voice low and heavy. He told the story of how he, UCI, and Crow had grown up together in the satellite sector, scraping by day to day. And how one day, Kalen appeared before them, inviting them to join his team. Back then, Satellite was ruled by dual gangs. Even in a place that poor, people still oppressed their own just to survive. Kalen formed a gang to fight back, and together with UCI, Jack, and Crow, they defeated every rival group, taking control of the entire satellite. Under Kalen's lead, Team Enforcers became the strongest gang in Satellite, and because of that, the era of dueling gangs eventually ended. But Kalen hadn't done it to save anyone. He'd done it for one reason: Enforcers. The Enforcers of dueling. Then one day, he went too far. He targeted sector security itself. That night, the rain poured. UCI remembered seeing the body of a security officer lying at Kalen's feet. I was going to take your place in prison that night, UCI said quietly. But that officer, he looked right at me. That's why he patted me on the shoulder. Stop lying to me! Kalen shouted. Even now, you think I'll believe that? You traitor! UCI's chest tightened painfully. He clenched his teeth and set a card face down on his dual disk. Kalen, I'm not lying. You were the one we respected the most. His voice carried such raw sincerity that for a brief moment, the madness faded from Kalen's face. But hatred, pain, and rage still burned within him. He said nothing, only glaring silently. I set one card face down and end my turn. UCI. Kalen's voice grew low, trembling with fury. Do you know what the worst pain was when the earthbound immortal chose me as a dark signer and brought me back? What was it? It's that this world is still the same, stubborn, dull, and suffocating. You three idiots, what have you even done since I died? Just wasting time? Kalen's scream tore through the storm, his throat raw with fury. I draw. Kalen's dual runner roared down the glowing line of the field. His grin widened. I set 1, 2, no, 3 cards face down. What? UCI narrowed his eyes behind his visor. Setting that many cards on the first turn, could he have bricked? Now I activate the spell card Allure of Darkness. I draw 2 cards, then banish 1 dark monster from my hand. If I don't have any dark monsters, I have to discard my entire hand instead. Oh, so that's how he's avoiding discarding. Shinji muttered as he watched the broadcast feed on his dual runner's screen. Kalen drew 2 cards, glanced at them, then smirked. I banish Infernity Guardian from my hand. He flicked another card forward. I discard Infernity Beast to activate the equip spell Different Dimension Reincarnation. I special summon the banished Infernity Guardian. A skeletal demon flared into existence beside him, surrounded by crimson fire. Infernity Guardian, level 4/dark/fiend/ATK 1200/def 1700. Infernity? Crow frowned. That's not the deck he used before. Jack scowled. No. He's changed everything. Infernity, huh? From the sidelines, Hikaru felt a chill of recognition. He'd read all about Infernity decks before, the dreaded Infernity Trishula combo, the infamous stories of players surrendering when their back row got wiped by Harpy's Feather Duster. It was a name that carried weight. Ha! I normal summon my tuner monster, Infernity Beetle. A small, horned fiend with ember red wings appeared, its fan-like arms glowing with flame. Infernity Sage level 2/dark/fiend/ATK 400. A tuner? He's going for a synchro summon. Exactly. Kalen declared. I tune level 2 Infernity Sage with level 4 Infernity Guardian. Infernity Sage rose into the air, its body dissolving into twin black stars. The stars circled Infernity Guardian, engulfing it in dark fire. The living and the dead converge in the void, emerge, demon from the depths of hell. Synchro Summon. Level 6 Infernity Doom Archfiend. A towering fiend descended in a whirl of golden flame, bracelets of molten gold clamped around its wrists. The blades of its wings turned like clock hands as it landed with a thunderous crash. Infernity Doom Archfiend, level 6/dark/fiend/ATK 2200/def 1600. Only 2200 attack points? Crow said, relief creeping into his voice. Good, Jack muttered. That's no match for Stardust Dragon. But Kalen only laughed harder. Ha ha ha. You're letting your guard down already? That's naive, Crow. You too, Jack. He pointed toward UCI's field. Infernity Doom Archfiend's effect activates. Once per turn, I can target one face-up card you control. Its effects are negated until the end of this turn. He thrust his arm out, finger aimed at Stardust Dragon. The Stardust's glow dimmed as waves of dark energy rippled around it. Negated? The effect of Infernity Doom Archfiend doesn't stop there. Kalen's voice echoed through the flames. If I have no cards in my hand, it can destroy that monster it negated. What? Jack and Crow exclaimed at once. Wait a second, Carly blurted, nervously twirling her finger in the air. But UCI's Stardust Dragon can just tribute itself to negate that, right? That's what it does, it stops destruction effects. Jack shook his head, frowning. No, Stardust Dragon can't respond to this one. What do you mean it can't? Crow demanded. Stardust Dragon's effect only activates when a card effect would destroy a card on the field, Jack explained. It tributes itself to negate and destroy that effect. But Infernity Doom Archfiend's effect doesn't activate to destroy, it first negates Stardust's effect, then, since Kalen's hand is empty, it destroys the monster directly. The negation happens first, Stardust can't react once its own effect is already negated. Carly gasped. Then, that's like the perfect counter to Stardust Dragon. Yeah, Jack muttered grimly. It is. Dark crimson fire erupted from the Archfiend's body. The flaming aura surged toward Stardust Dragon, wrapping around it mid-flight. The dragon's brilliant light dimmed, its scales blackening under the infernal blaze, then a second burst of hellfire followed, engulfing it completely. Boom! Stardust Dragon shattered into fragments of light, scattering across the barren plain. Kalen threw back his head and howled with laughter. Ha 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 ha! Ah ha 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 ha! UCI, your dragon went down faster than I expected. How's that supposed to satisfy me if it's that weak? He grinned wickedly. Battle! Infernity Doom Archfiend, attack UCI directly. The Archfiend hurled a wave of molten energy across the ground. The earth erupted like magma, the infernal blaze tearing toward UCI's dual runner. But UCI's eyes flashed. I activate my set card, Scrap Iron Scarecrow. A rickety scarecrow made of twisted metal and wire appeared before him, a broken mask glowing on its face. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, Scrap Iron Scarecrow negates that attack. Then this card doesn't go to the graveyard, it resets itself face down. The Iron Scarecrow caught the Archfiend's blast head-on. The attack dispersed, and the Scarecrow slowly folded back into the ground, recovering itself on UCI's field. Kalen chuckled darkly. Heh, not bad for an opening act. Then, still smirking, he slowed his dual runner. I end my turn. That wraps up this part of What If Fusion Deck User in a Different Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.